So, you just read the title of the video and you probably think I'm insane. Honestly, that's probably a fair assessment. But I do think it's time that we seriously consider the possibility that ArieForce One could become the best RMC in North America. Now, I haven't personally been on Steve or Iron Gwazi, but I will be getting those credits soon. I have a trip to Busch Gardens in October, and I'm taking my first trip to Cedar Point next summer. So hopefully by then I'll have been on all 3 rides, and I can come back to this video and give my complete final answer. But for now, let's take a look at ArieForce One and what its chances are of becoming the best RMC. Okay, so a quick disclaimer, I know I'm not the first person to talk about this topic, it's a pretty common topic, but I did think it would be fun to give my own opinion on this ride. So I'm going to go ahead and admit my bias here early. ArieForce One's going to only be a 40-minute drive for me, so obviously I'm a bit more excited for it than your average enthusiast, but I think it's good that we're finally getting more options across the countries for like big RMCs. I think some people need to kind of prepare for the idea that one day Steve won't be the only one anymore, and it probably won't be the best, and that day might be coming sooner than you think. So for starters, let's take a look at the layout. ArieForce starts out with a 145-foot drop at 83 degrees. This probably won't compare to Gwazi or Steve's drops, considering they're much steeper, but I still expect some classic RMC forcefulness. So after that drop, we go straight into what's called a Raven Trust Dive, which is supposedly the first of its kind, although it's really basically just a dive loop, but also it like turns you around 90 degrees. It's kind of cool. It's hard for me to say whether this will actually compete with Steve or Gwazi's like Outer Banks off of their drops, but I think it probably has a chance. The whip from the dive off of this loop is actually pretty forceful, it seems, because it whips you one way and then like almost like it acts like it's going to send you one way and then sends you the other. So that does look pretty cool. And I'm sure that plus the inversion will give some pretty good force here. After this, we reach a speed hill and then into the 0G stall. In my opinion, this is kind of the highlight of the whole ride. This or maybe one other part. This will be the largest 0G stall in the United States, and it kind of looks like Velocicoasters, but just on steroids. Like, the amount of hang time here is just absolutely absurd, and I think it'll probably translate well into the actual ride. After this, we have a pretty big outer bank that looks to give some good ejector. I really don't think this will be as good as Gwazi's, and it certainly won't be better than Steve's, but what comes up next will probably make up for it. ArieForce goes through a double up and then into a barrel roll over the arcade. This kind of looks insane and could be one of the best head chopper moments on any coaster. This really does remind me of Maverick's Heartline roll that got cut, in the sense that it kind of makes you feel like you're going to run straight into the ground, or I guess in this case an arcade, but still, like, you're literally rolling directly over a building. Like, people are gonna think they're gonna die here, which I kind of think is sick. This is absolutely gonna be better than Gwazi's death roll, which I kind of think is a little overrated, and it's probably better than any inversion moment on Steve. After all this, we get a 0G roll, which looks to be just as forceful as any other, and then to a quad down, similar to that of Lightning Rod at Dollywood. This quad down does seem to be a bit faster and give more ejector than the one on Lightning Rod, though. So after the quad down, the ride finally goes into its brake run. Honestly, it's just non-stop force, which I know is kind of the RMC thing, but really it is just non-stop, and it just keeps throwing crazy elements at you that are pretty unique. I think the main thing that will detract from this ride for a lot of people will be how short it is in comparison. Gwazi sits at around 2 minutes, and Steve is about 2.5, while ArieForce is estimated to only be 100 seconds. So after all that, is it seriously going to live up to the hype and at least be as good as Steve or Gwazi? I think so. It's a super unique layout, so it's not just a direct comparison of these, but you can kind of look at it and piece it together. It's not going to have that crazy ejector that Steve may have, and it may not have the pure speed and smoothness of Gwazi, but it's going to bring other things to the table. I genuinely think that stall and barrel roll can be the best moments on a coaster in North America, and it really just comes down to how RMC executes them. So other than the layouts, what really can be used to compare these coasters? So I guess the only thing we can look at is like theming. Steel Vengeance has the Old West design that does fit into Frontier Town at Cedar Point. I like the idea here, but man, there's something about the color of the tracks that I just don't like. They seem just kind of gross. Maybe it's just me, but I really don't like them. I know they weren't going to choose a vibrant color for it, but I just don't like the weird reddish brown tracks, and the trains don't really stand out to me or add anything to the experience. They're not as bad as the tracks, but there's nothing special there. Gwazi, on the other hand, really does stand out to me. I do like the purple tracks on it, and the crocodile trains are pretty cool, or I guess gator. I don't know if they're gator or crocodile. They never really made that clear. I think this is a pretty good example of not being overly themed, but still giving some variety to spice up the ride so it doesn't feel monotonous and the same as all other RMCs. So how does ArieForce compare to this? Well, it's themed after flying, as you could probably tell by the name of the ride. I do love the 2 colored tracks on RMCs like the Joker, so the red and blue here is something I'm going to be a fan of. Also, the white background for this just makes the colors pop even more. The trains are themed to an airplane, with the front seat kind of being like the cockpit with buttons and radars being present. And it's small details like this that really add to a coaster experience for me and makes a ride stand out. I think the ArieForce is probably on par with the theming of Gwazi, and they both to me are better than Steve. But I do understand that some people couldn't care less about a theme and just want pure intensity, so none of that really matters to them. So how do we determine what the best RMC is? Honestly, we don't. It just kind of comes down to personal preference, I think. Steve is probably the most intense ride, while Gwazi's going to come with a more airtime filled ride with some cool theming, and ArieForce One will be a ride that's about moments that are unique and intense like Steve, but it's also going to have nice stylized theming like Gwazi. I think the ArieForce will almost be like a weird combination of these two coasters, and it's going to take the best aspects of those rides and blend them into what I think will be the best RMC in North America. So I'm sure this video is going to upset a good bit of enthusiasts out there, so feel free to call me names in the comments while defending your beloved number one. I just think it's good to be open-minded on topics like these because you honestly never know what your opinion on a coaster is going to be until you finally ride it. Maybe I should take some of my own advice for once.